are interconnected with nature and community. There's just one problem. Most of it doesn't exist. So is Solarpunk simply another impossible idealistic internet aesthetic, or could it actually become the blueprint to rebuilding our cities, and maybe even our entire relationship with the planet? In his book, Capitalist Realism, Mark Fisher writes that it is easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. Whether or not you agree with his conclusion, his observation about our collective imagination feels incredibly accurate. Over the past few decades, depictions of humanity's seemingly inevitable dystopian collapse have become some of our most influential cultural stories. Movies like I Am Legend and TV shows like The Walking Dead depict a world where virus outbreaks lead to the near extinction of humanity. Video games like Cyberpunk 2077 portray technologically advanced futures defined by dim atmospheres, neon lights, and power-hungry corporations. Part of the reason these stories resonate is because conflict attracts us to stories. A world where everyone was happy and free and stable wouldn't exactly make for the most compelling TV show or video game. But another reason is that they reflect many of our genuine anxieties about the future. Climate change, political instability, and AI automation have made dystopian futures feel like plausible outcomes. So it's no surprise that our culture has become extremely good at imagining collapse. But what if we did something far more difficult and imagined what success looks like? What if we didn't automatically assume that collapse was inevitable? Those are the questions that Solarpunk attempts to answer. The word solarpunk combines solar, representing renewable energy and sustainability, with punk, representing resistance to the status quo. The origins of Solarpunk begin with an unassuming blog post from 2008 written by an anonymous blogger, Republic of the Bees, titled From Steampunk to Solarpunk. In the blog post, Republic of Bees describes the design of the Beluga Skysail, a hybrid cargo ship that uses sail power to supplement the ship's engines, resulting in fuel savings between 10 to 35%. So, in honor of the Beluga Skysail's maiden voyage, they write, I'm going to suggest a new literary genre, solarpunk. Unlike steampunk, which imagines an alternate history where Victorian steam technology continued to evolve, solarpunk revolves around a much more practical question. If fossil fuels were no longer cheap or no longer sustainable, what technologies would naturally evolve to replace them? Rather than imagining impossible inventions, Republic of the Bees imagines existing engineering principles pushed to their logical conclusion, combining centuries-old systems with modern ones. That's why the Beluga Skysail became the movement's honorary cargo ship. Instead of abandoning sailing altogether, engineers combined centuries-old wind power with modern navigation systems to reduce fuel consumption. Progress, in other words, is about rediscovering what the past already got right, reintegrating it with present-day advancements, and discarding what clearly isn't working. Republic of the Bees also argued that, unlike most speculative fiction, solarpunk didn't have to remain speculative. Many of its ideas, like renewable energy, passive architecture, wind-assisted shipping, and local food production, already exist in some form. The biggest challenge is intentionally deciding to build a society around them. I actually really like the way the initial solarpunk future was described because, unlike the internet aesthetic that currently dominates the idea, Republic of the Bees assumed that this transition would be difficult. He assumed it would be politically messy, filled with conflicts over energy, economics, and entrenched interests. You know what else is way too difficult to achieve? Finding doctors that actually take your healthcare insurance. I've been putting off a shoulder injury for months because the process of getting help was just way too complicated. I had to search for a doctor on Google that actually takes my insurance and set an appointment and have to wait potentially weeks just to see them. But today's sponsor, ZocDoc, solved that problem. ZocDoc is a platform where you can search and compare local in-network doctors with over 150,000 providers within 200 plus specialties across all 50 states. Their website has tons of reviews from real patients and detailed doctor profiles to help you choose the right one. For my shoulder injury, I needed an orthopedic doctor. So I just searched for an orthopedic consultation for arm and elbow specifically, plugged in my insurance, and ZocDoc showed me all available options in my area and their reviews. From there, it was as simple as making an appointment within the app. Appointments happen fast, usually within 24 to 72 hours, and you can even get same-day appointments. So if you've been putting off an injury like I was, or just a simple doctor's visit because of all the hoops you gotta go through, please prioritize your health and use ZocDoc. It is completely free to use, so if you want to check it out, you can go to ZocDoc.com/Cole or click the first link in the description box below. Solarpunk remained relatively niche for the next several years. Then, in 2012, Brazilian editor Gerson Lodi Ribeiro published the first Solarpunk anthology, Solarpunk, Historias Ecológicas y Fantásticas en un Mundo Sustentável. It was the first serious attempt to turn this loose collection of ideas into an actual body of fiction, imagining sustainable societies that weren't post-apocalyptic or technologically primitive. But Solarpunk didn't really become recognizable until it found a home on the internet. In 2014, artist Olivia Luis published a Tumblr post that would end up defining the movement's visual identity for years to come. Instead of the sterile white minimalism that often dominates futuristic architecture, she imagines something warmer. Art Nouveau-inspired buildings draped in greenery, stained glass solar panels, communal greenhouses, walkable streets lined with independent businesses, handcrafted goods, renewable energy, and technology that felt like it belonged to the natural world. Those illustrations spread rapidly across Tumblr, Pinterest, and later Instagram, eventually becoming the images most people associate with Solarpunk today. The original blog post was primarily concerned with engineering and economics, but then Tumblr gave it an aesthetic language. Neither is inherently more important than the other, but as beautiful images started to spread across the internet, much more than discussions about how to actually build that future, the imagery became more distinct and important than the actual design philosophy that inspired it. So what is the realistic, useful design philosophy of Solarpunk instead of the idealistic aesthetic we typically associate with it? And how close is that aesthetic to practical design? Rather than asking how cities can dominate nature, Solarpunk asks how they can begin behaving more like natural ecosystems, and that idea actually has a name: biomimicry. In short, biomimicry is the replication of the models, systems, and elements of nature for the purpose of solving complex human problems. Janine Benyus, who popularized the field of biomimicry, summarizes it as learning from nature as a model, mentor, and measure. After nearly 3.8 billion years of evolution, nature has become remarkably efficient at regulating temperature, recycling waste, conserving water, and using energy. So biomimicry asks, what if we used nature as our design mentor? Take cooling, for example. Modern buildings typically fight heat by pumping enormous amounts of electricity into air conditioning systems. But what if that building simply didn't get that hot in the first place? This is where passive design enters the picture. Passive cooling relies on architecture itself to regulate temperature before mechanical air conditioning becomes necessary. Building orientation, cross-ventilation, thick walls that slowly absorb heat, shaded windows, overhanging roofs, internal courtyards, and carefully placed vegetation can dramatically reduce cooling demands. And many of these ideas aren't futuristic at all. They've existed for centuries in traditional architecture throughout the Middle East, North Africa, and Southern Europe before cheap fossil fuels made constant air conditioning practical. Now, modern architects are increasingly combining those ancient ideas with contemporary materials and computer modeling. One of my favorite examples I came across was Zimbabwe's Eastgate Center. Inspired by the self-ventilating structure of termite mounds, architect Mick Pierce designed the building to circulate air naturally, significantly reducing the need for conventional air conditioning. This same sort of biomimicry thinking can be applied to any other area of our cities and homes.